So this video is going to walk you through, as best as I can explain it, how to perfectly set up to play World of Warcraft with Consoleport. Alright, I know some people out there are like me, and maybe you've always wanted to play World of Warcraft, but you don't like keyboard and mouse gaming. This will solve that. First, what you'll need is a PS4 controller, or an Xbox One controller, or a Steam controller. Also, what you'll need is the Twitch app for the mod section. And I'm gonna go over some basic interface of what the controller is gonna be like, at least as far as the PS4 and the Xbox One. Steam, I can't get into that because it's probably more complicated. But anyways, so for the PS4 and the Xbox One, when you're playing, the start button, the start and options button is going to be your map. That brings up your map. It puts away your map, brings up your map. It's quick access to your map. On the PS4, the touchpad button brings up the menus. And on Xbox One, I'm assuming that's the Xbox guide button. On the PS4, the share button brings up your inventory. The L1 and the share button brings up your character menu, your character sheet. L2 share brings up your spellbook. Holding L2 and L1 and then the share button, that brings up your spec and your talent sheet. I'm trying to remember everything. That's all by default. When also what I did, just if you like to queue up for stuff quickly, I went ahead and I binded the group finder to the L1, L2 plus options or start button, whatever you want to call it, options start. So I can just hold L1, L2, hit options, and bam, group finder pops up. So anyways, that's basic stuff. Some other add-ons you can try in conjunction with this Consoleport works well. You don't have to use them, but I think immersion works really well with Consoleport, and also dynamic cam works really well with Consoleport. We're heading over to curseforge.com, the Consoleport add-on. As you can see, it shows you, it's really well laid out for you. It shows you description, links, what controllers are compatible, and a whole guide of how to do it. Will my controller work with Consoleport? Instructions. So anyways, if you're using steamlink like me, you won't need WoW Mapper. I'm using steamlink. For me, since I'm launching from Steam, all I gotta do is I go into the community settings and I select the correct controller layout from the community settings of the control that the Steam has available for your controller. But if you're not launching from Steam, you're gonna have to download WoW Mapper, and then it'll just run. It's a little tiny program, doesn't take any resources. It'll just run minimized while you play the game from your computer. So anyways, here's what it'll look like. Here's what it'll look like once you're inside, right? These are what the menus will look like. All right, it'll be a complete layout overhaul. Your system page will be like this, social, game, character, and it navigates just like a, a console game. Up, down on the directional pad to select each tile, left and right. X is accept, you click on stuff with X. Now when you load in the game, it should be defaulted, immediately recognize whatever controller you're using, and it'll pop up immediately on that character and say, hey, do you want to use this yes recommended or no? You say yes recommended. If that doesn't pop up right away, what you want to do is hit system, you go down to the controls. It'll be the symbol of, you're using PlayStation, so it'll say PlayStation controls. You're using Xbox, it'll say Xbox controls. You hit controls, you go over, you hit controllers, you select the right controller you're using, and then it'll reload the UI. Then that will pop up what I described before, and you hit yes recommended, and then you should be good. This controls above system is also where you go if you want to change your targeting to the D-pads, like more like a Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. That's what I like to do, but it defaults it's not like that. So if you want to do that, you delete the binding for the target that it comes defaulted with, and you put nearest target on the right D-pad, previous target on the left D-pad, and then you should be good. Here's what it looks like by default. This is the page I was telling you about, bindings. By default, it looks like this, right? But that's a little too obtrusive for me, so I switched to orthodox. So basically, it's all the same circles and buttons, but it's just they line them up in a straight line at the bottom, so it takes up less space. That's what I do. You can change that under the action bar tab. Someone asked if
I can't stand on it.
how do you decide your layout? Well, ultimately that decides on the class you have, what your personal preferences are, and the spec. The good thing is, if you're on one class and you're one of those people where you switch specs a lot, it'll remember what bindings for your spells you had on that spec. So if, let's say, you set up one spec, but then you switch over to another spec of that class, but then you want to switch back to the other spec. Like, let's say you're playing a boomkin, then you want to switch back to a feral. It'll remember how you had it set up, so that's good. But I would just slowly work your way and figure it out. Like for me, I'm gonna give two examples of specs I play, just for the intents and purposes of this video, so you can get an idea of how you can decide on what feels natural playing with the controller. Also for targeting, some people I know they have some trouble getting used to being accurate with their targeting. For me, I never have an issue. What the Consoleport does is if you look at somebody, make sure the camera is dead center on whoever you want to target. That helps, right? And then if it still hits, you hit the right D-pad, bam, they're selected, right? If you still hit the wrong guy, so like say somebody's really close to him, you just make a little slight adjustment on the right stick. The right stick is the camera, and the view. Just and then maybe one or two more taps on the right D-pad, bam, you got him. And you can do that in milliseconds. You'll learn real quick to do that real fast. Targeting is just as quick and just as efficient as a keyboard and mouse. You'll get used to it once you practice. The big issue that people have is they're so used to the PC and computer and keyboard and the mouse that it just feels alien, and they're like, oh, this could never work. Trust me. You try a level 1, and then you work that character to level 120. By the time you get to level 120, you'll be a pro at it. But anyways, so what you can do I'm gonna give you 2 examples: Feral and Subtlety Rogue. Feral Druid and Subtlety Rogue. What I do for my Feral, here's how I set it up. And I set it up. The opener is usually Rake, right? So for Druids, each shapeshift form is a different layout. Like you get more button potential on Consoleport if you're a Druid or a Rogue, because it's a whole new slots for each shapeshift form, and stealth versus unstealth. So you got your base non-shapeshifted form of Druid. That's a whole bunch. That's all the empty buttons that you can put. For me, I put Feral on square, Feral on triangle, Feral on circle. The reason I did that was because it makes it easy not to mess up. Because if I'm in my base form and I'm not in Feral, and I go to attack without thinking, then bam, I'm already ready to attack, ready to go. Because I immediately switch to Feral, because like, so once I'm in Feral, I got my Rake is triangle. That's usually what I open with. I got my Shred is square, and my what is it called? Not swipe. Anyways, not thrash. Whatever the one that's not the swipe. I got my swipe on circle, right? So then I got my stealth is L1 R2. I got my ferocious bite on R2, and I got my rip on R1, right? So I'll open with Rake, then I'll shred them until I can rip them, and then from there on I just ferocious bite and shred pretty much. If it's a group, I'll open with thrash. That I got L1 square. So you just figure out what works for you. I'm a resto affinity, so I got all my resto healings on L2 and on the face buttons of L2. I have all the utility. I got flight forms L1X, right? Base X is jump. Base X, so regular, you press X. When you press X, it's jump, or it's talk to an NPC. You're either jumping or talking to an NPC with X. When I hit L1X, that's flight form. When I hit L1 left, that's bear form. When I hit L1 down, that's I can't remember the name of it. Survival instincts. So now on to the sub rogue. The sub rogue, it's not that complicated. It's even less complicated than the druid actually. I got for this. Let me look up the names of the. Okay, the name I got backstab on square. I got eviscerated circle. I got nightbleed set to non-stealth on R1. And then for stealth form, I got R1 as Shadow Strike. So that makes it easy because as soon as I Shadow Strike, I come out of stealth and I can immediately hit R1 again and apply Nightblade on the same button. Like I'm just hit R1 once to Shadow Strike, hit R1 again to apply Nightblade. So I got Triangle Shuriken Storm. I got up is Shadow Dance on the directional pad. Down is Symbols of Death. L1 right is Shadow Blades. And I'm just trying to give people an idea of how easy it is to play on a controller. This would be the opener for Sub Rogue. R2 is Stealth, so I'd be in Stealth already. If you need to re-stealth in combat, that's L1 R2 is Vanish. I got Shadow Meld on L2. So if I want to open on somebody, usually what I would do is I'd sneak up to them, either Shadow Strike or Cheap Shot them, immediately apply Nightblade. So that would be either R1 or square, and then R1 again to apply Nightblade, and then Shadow Dance with up directional pad, Symbols of Death with down directional pad, then Shadow Strike, which would be R1, Eviscerate with Circle, Shadow Strike, R1 again, Circle, Eviscerate, and then, March for Death, L1X, and then that gives me an extra Eviscerate, and then repeat Shadow Dance again and go back through the rotation. It's really not hard. You just gotta think and work it out. What's gonna work for you and how and your playstyle and where you want the buttons, what feels natural in your hands. It's really, I mean, once you get used to it, unless you're die-hard keyboard and mouse, you'll be much more comfortable sitting in a chair, not having your wrists rested on the desk or the keyboard. But yeah, so I mean, if anyone needs any help, and just leave a comment and I'll answer it. If you run into any problems or you want any more tips and tricks, because I've been doing this for a while. This is the only way I've ever played World of Warcraft. Ever. So I know there may be biases for people that have traditionally played, but if you have any questions, I'm sure I've ran into the same problems or questions that you have. So just shoot me a comment and I'll answer them as efficiently as possible. And everybody, you have a great day, and this is the end of the video.